Morning, this is Tatiyana, Compliance Search. I'm one of the recruiters here, and we wanted to talk about the impact on compliance and the Wall Street after the election. So I have Jack Kelly here, who's the Managing Director, and he'll be able to answer some questions for us.
Oh, great. Thank you. This should be fun.
So, Jack, what did you think about the election? What do you think?
Well, it's really interesting. So, trying to be a good dad and a good, show some civic responsibility. I had my kids watch try to watch, the election results.
Oh, wow.
Well, it didn't work so well. So basically, I'm watching it. My daughter is on Instagram liking, I don't know, pink unicorns or whatever they like. My son is, she's about 13. My son is 15. He's on his phone. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know if I want to know what he's doing. So I was trying to get him interested, but to no avail. So on behalf of our audience of Wall Street and corporate and compliance professionals, I stayed up all night, being terribly bored out of my mind watching it. But it was interesting because I think what happened, seriously, that it's going to have a huge impact on corporate America, Wall Street, and then in particular for our the biggest part of our market, the compliance and legal regulatory professionals. It's going to have a significant impact on how this plays out.
Okay, so how do you think it will really impact it?
See, I think what it's the Democrats and the Republicans have such a different ideology, and just in full disclosure, with our newsletter, the Compliance Exchange, our blogs, ComplianceX.com, and all our other media properties, we really don't try to take sides. We try to be apolitical in the sense of really looking at the issues and how it will impact. I guess the only issue is selfish issues, like how it's going to impact us as a business, how it's going to impact the people that we work with, people who we try to place, firms that are trying to hire people, the newsletters and the information we provide to people. So, and I'm saying that because I do notice with our newsletters and blogs, you get people who get very irate on one side or the other, and they just think if you're kind of say something and it seems like more Republican, they're all over and they don't hear the message because they're just thinking, okay, you're a shill for the Republican. Or sometimes they say, oh, you're Democratic, and they block out everything. And that's why what we're trying to do is looking at it just in reality. And the reality is, there's a fundamental, I know I'm saying the obvious, but there's a fundamental difference in the way they look at the world. So with the Republicans, they're clearly, against, regulation. Their mindset is less government, unless you want to have the government, bombing other countries, and then there's more government. No, but less government interference, and leave business alone for the most part. Let businesses do what they do. The free markets will prevail, and if firms are good and successful, they'll remain successful. If they're not good, they'll be washed out, and they shouldn't have all these rules and regulations. So when you draw it down to our core audience, that's in the compliance, the regulatory, the legal, the audit. What happens is this: if under Obama, he was under pressure because of the financial crisis, right? So, they had to do something, and they went after all these firms to say, all right, you guys blew up the whole economy, and you're evil and terrible, that pitchfork mentality, and started going after all these investment banks. And so much so that you saw the DoddFrank Rules and Regulations put in place. You saw these massive fines that we write about all the time. Like it's like, would you have thought like every day it seems like another $1 billion fine, right?
It's something
all the time.
Always
all the time. It's never ending.
Right.
So Obama and under the Democrats and his government, really putting in so much regulatory oversight that these firms had to build up to deal with it. They had to deal with putting in the new Dodd-Frank rules and regulations, deal with enhanced regulatory scrutiny and enforcement actions going after these firms. The after effects, if you're the firm that's being fined or penalized, you have to beef up. But then other companies, either they haven't been fined, they feel they have to do something because otherwise they'll be in trouble. So you see that as well. Now, if the Republicans win, Republicans because they won, I think it's going to change.
How do you think that will change?
Well, one of the things I think they're going to look at is, let's take Wall Street, but this is going to be the same in corporate America as well as within the financial industry, is that they're going to probably try to get rid of Dodd-Frank. As a non-attorney, I don't know, can you just throw it out? Do you have to, or can you just defang it, declare it, or just do something to really slow it down? Because if you think about it, with Dodd-Frank, it's changed a lot on Wall Street. That you have to with the Volcker Rule, you can't have the prop trading, you can't have hedge funds and other things that really restrict businesses. So Wall Street obviously not too happy about it and trying to push back. It's still not all in place. So you got to wonder, what are they going to do? Are they going to try to just get rid of it completely? Are they going to try to just like a slow, painful death, like just drag their feet? You know what I mean? You see what goes on, in Congress.
Right.
They just nothing gets done. So it could be one of those things that gets just stuck and nothing happens. And if that's the case, then it's a big change. All of a sudden, all the strides in terms of regulation are now kind of being pulled back.
Well, given that there's been so many strides, even though you're right, they do drag their feet, but there have been major strides. For example, Volcker Rule, like you had mentioned, there's even other firms, even not within the Wall Street, but other firms, luxury goods, pharmaceuticals, etc., who really are looking at the DoddFrank and taking, the regulations and taking the next step. So obviously, the regulations that are already in place are affecting businesses throughout all industries. So I would be very surprised that they can just pull back. Maybe they can amend it, sure, but that would mean that they would have to have more additional regulations, it seems like, or additional amendments. So to me, I think that they would just leave it alone. But you think that maybe they would kind of try to amend it or take it, pull back on it.
That's a great point. On one hand, you would think rational people, and this is why I want to give a disclaimer. But I'm not coming from a Republican or a Democratic. In fact, if anything, again, full disclosure, I would probably put myself in the camp as an independent or a libertarian. I just lesser government. But I'm very hypocritical because I say lesser government, right? Lesser government interference. Let people do whatever they want to do. Same-sex marriage. Fine. If you don't believe in same-sex marriage, don't get gay married. That's fine. You want to do, if you want to smoke pot, fine. It's like, so I'm not taking sides here.
Right.
But here's where I get a little hypocritical, because I would like to think that, so while my philosophy is, hey, less government as it comes to Wall Street and business, I'm more government because that's our livelihood. So I know what I'm saying on one hand is not the other. So for Wall Street, I do selfishly want more, oversight, because that's good for our business, because then they have to hire more compliance people, more regulators, more attorneys, more risk people, more auditors. So I'd like to think rational people, having seen the financial crisis and just the devastation it's wrought, that they would say, you know what, even though we don't believe in big government and we don't believe in excessive regulations, we still need to do stuff to keep, because, it's still fresh. How bad people are still hurting really bad. Even though the stock market is up considerably, the average person is hurting. So I'd like to believe, on one level, that they're not going to just roll everything back to the way it was. But, you don't know. Sometimes you could get, with power, you get a little power drunk, right? You get a little power crazy. Maybe all of a sudden now they're in, we could do everything. Right. And it gotta be a little tempting when you have all these lobbyists for the big banks and big corporations kind of hitting you up and saying, hey, this rule, this regulation is really, hurting our businesses. We can't grow. Do something about it. Hey, you guys, come on, you guys won. I thought you were supposed to do something about it. Right. And so it's going to be interesting to play out. I think hopefully there's not going to, maybe there'll be some pullback, maybe they'll pull back a little bit Dodd-Frank, maybe when it comes time for like the SEC and the CFTC and other government regulators to go for money before Congress, maybe they won't give them all the budgetary stuff they want. So that's how they may slow things down and say, this is our way of just keeping them in check.
Sure.
But I hope I'm wrong. I hope they just say, hey, listen, we're the party of less regulation, less big government interference, but in this instance, boy, we really have to make sure we have people in place and rules in place and laws in place, because we can't have another financial crisis.
So what's the alternative? Let's just pretend that, they'll pull back on the regulations.
I've seen this happen again and again. It goes from one side to the other. So let's say they do that, which is a possibility.
Right.
So they roll back Dodd-Frank, they don't give funding to the SEC and CFTC, they do whatever it takes to not have new rules or regulations. Then, as much scandals as we see now, oh my God. This is with
Right.
Think about it. All these scandals are happening with heightened regulation. So imagine it'll be chaos. It'll be insanity. And then what will happen? They'll then have to swing back even further. You know what I mean? And then the same way the Democrats were kicked out, the Republicans would be kicked out, saying, "What are you doing? You guys came in and you ruined the whole economy again. This is terrible." And then kind of go all the way to the other extreme. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Oh my gosh. So what do you think, an average compliance person, being an SME and DoddFrank or Volcker Rule or any other regulations, what do you think should he be afraid for his career at this point?
I think at this stage of the game that it would be really surprising for the Republicans to just all of a sudden just do away with everything. It wouldn't be surprising for them at least to do something, if nothing else, to pander to their base and try to say, "Hey, look what we've done. We're maybe these aspects are fine, but these aspects aren't fine, so we're going to pull back on some things." So I could at least reasonably see some things pulling back on, as a token to show, and also that they really believe that you probably is onerous. And to be fair, there probably are. I even hear from compliance people all the time that you would think they would be the biggest proponents of more regulations, but a lot of times they realize it's just sometimes it's level after level after layer that becomes so cumbersome. I can't tell you how many people in compliance I hear from that are frustrated that they feel the regulators are forcing them to do certain things that really aren't looking for the bad guys, more like substance. More style over substance. And so maybe there are some aspects that they can weed out, but keep really the meat to make sure that everything is done correctly.
Okay, but you think that they should stay put?
Absolutely, because you know what, these things, it doesn't happen overnight. These things are gradual. Especially with Congress, they go at snail's pace. So even if they wanted to do something, the time they do it, we're in the next presidential cycle, and then nothing's going to happen anyway because no one wants to do anything that's going to be trouble for whoever's candidate is. So chances are nothing's going to happen at all. I think what's most likely going to happen is going to be a period of time where they're coalescing their power base and seeing what they can do, what they can't do. There's certain things, certain industries probably will move quicker. Probably like the energy industry with the pipelines, and some of the pharmaceutical industries and some other areas that Obamacare probably will be the ones first going after. I wouldn't be surprised, like Obamacare would be kind of a lightning rod that they try to kind of push back. So maybe people who are involved with the regulatory legal side of there might have a little bit more concern. Maybe some other industries concerned. I think with this, it's those the wounds are still sensitive, so it would be hard to really push. So I think as a career people in this area, it's definitely safe. But one of those things where you just got to kind of watch and see how it plays out. And just to give a shameless plug, that's why you got to listen to our sound, our video podcast, our SoundCloud podcast, our newsletter, our blogs. This way we keep you up to date with everything.
Yeah, I think that this was really helpful. I mean, for someone who's just starting out, from a law school or, just graduated and they're just getting into compliance because, they see how hard it is with all the rules and regulations, to be fair, you should probably pay attention to how it affects.
Absolutely, because it's interesting. It doesn't happen in a bubble, So these things that happen, you have all these moving parts that have an effect on it. And I wonder, too, now looking back, where as recruiters, the compliance has been so hot. And by hot, I'll define it, meaning that we're getting jobs in across the board, at all different levels and geographically everywhere. And if it wasn't a hot area, you could just say, all right, it's just DoddFrank driven. It's just anti-money laundering driven. It's just dealing with the most recent, regulatory matter. But we're seeing things, whether it's in New York, in California, in the Midwest, Southwest, Florida, Chicago, everywhere, from investment banks and broker dealers and hedge funds and private banks, insurance companies. Actually, the demand is so great. We started ComplianceJobs.com, which actually isn't really the recruiting, but job postings where firms could post the jobs themselves. And it turned out it's huge. I mean, we have everything from Twitter to Johnson & Johnson to IBM to Facebook to Google, all these firms. So there's huge needs across the board. So to me, that shows it's a really, strong, hot, vibrant market, and that's going to last. And I think it's a trend that's there. I think it's, something that's that's ingrained in us now, that what could go wrong if you don't have these people. So I think it's a long-term thing. But at the same time, whenever you're dealing with politicians, and you always gotta wonder what they're going to do for their own, whether they really believe it or they're trying to appease a certain segment of their voters, that they could pull something to throw us off. But I think it's definitely going to still be a very strong market moving forward. Also, even worst case scenario, let's say let's say they do pull back a lot of regulation and a lot of the budgets for the different regulators, and you make it very difficult to keep up this new regulatory initiative that's been going on for the last bunch of years. So let's say that even happens. I guess on a negative side, maybe that hotness, that regulatory gun to the head of hiring might slow down a lot. But theoretically, when these firms are paying billions and billions and billions, literally in fines, billions of dollars in legal costs, billions of dollars in litigation, billions of dollars in technology and hiring people in the compliance area, theoretically, all that money could then go back into the firms themselves and be put into other areas that could facilitate additional business. So let's say, okay, the Volcker Rule doesn't get stripped out. They take it out. So now they can get back into the banks can get back into prop trading. Maybe they can get back into dealing with hedge funds. And if that happens, then theoretically the firm's going to make more money. They're going to have to hire more people and hire more compliance people. So even if worst case scenario, right, they pull back on all these new rules and regulations and they put pressure and they cut the budgets, then if Wall Street gets their way, which that's what they would really want, the executives, because they'd rather have more money to go to the business side. And if that happens, then theoretically, unless the executives just take them in big bonuses and it doesn't get filtered down, but assume they don't do that, then it's going to filter down to hiring more bankers, more traders, more brokers, getting other business lines. And then with all this other increased business, theoretically you would need more compliance, legal, risk auditors to keep up with the additional business. So I think in a way, no pun intended, it's a little bit of a hedge. So even if that does, or it could be a combination of the two, where they pull back a little bit on regulation. So, you may not have that white hot need because the regulators are scaring the heck out of everybody. But then a lot of the money is going back into the business and the banks. And when I say the banks, too, this is going to happen in other industries. I'm using, Wall Street. That's kind of our core audience, but, we have a big audience outside of it, corporate America. But the same analogy holds true. So then that money will funnel back into other business ventures, which theoretically will make these companies more profitable and need to hire more people. So it could be a combination of all those.
So it sounds like either way, the compliance
area. I hope I'm not. I hope I'm not deluding myself and trying my need. But since everybody deserted me last night, and I'm watching it. I'm kind of on Twitter, reading all the art. I'm trying to figure out how it's going to play out,
right.
and that's kind of the scenarios. And either way, I think because it's become one of these areas where, again, someone who's not a fan of big government, and I admit it, it's kind of hypocritical on this front because it's self-serving to want them. But I think in this instance is one of those areas you need it. You have to have it because even when we had a lot of regulation, we saw everything was blown up. Even though we had a decent infrastructure. So I'm hoping that's that's still going to be in everyone's mind, so they know it has to stay in place. And still, so even if it doesn't keep growing the way it is, at least be there and somewhat grow, and the business could grow and it'll work out on all fronts.
Right. Well, this was very helpful,
okay.
Jack, and it definitely helped me out, as a new recruiter to understand where the trend will be, and I hope that it will help out any compliance folks out there as well.
Well, thank you very much. And if you like to share anything with us about this, feel free to call Tatiyana and myself at 212-997-3166 or email Tatiyana and myself at info@compliancesearch.com. And also, if you have any takes on it, if our audience is a really smart audience, and I'm not saying it to butter you up because you're listening, but yeah, I would say our newsletter goes out to about 120,000 people every day, and the vast majority of folks, they're college graduates, they're lawyers, they're MBAs, they're mid to senior level executives. So we deal with a very smart audience who know much more than we do about it. So if you have an interesting take on it, and feel free to say, Jack, you're all wet, you don't know what you're talking about. That's fine. My feelings won't get hurt. I'd be glad if you have anything you'd like us to post and put on there, whether it's an article format or something else that gives maybe a completely different perspective. And we, definitely email it to us at, to mine or Tatiyana's attention at info@compliancesearch.com, and we'd be glad to share it with everybody. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it was helpful, and have a great day.
Thank you.